Yeah, and on the topic of, on the topic of doctors treating those below them like shit, there is this real systemic culture of paying it forward, but like in the worst way possible. Where if you were made to feel like shit as a junior doctor, you now feel like you have the right to do that to the junior doctors that are under your wing. So, again, you put all of these things together, like, an inherently abusive system, higher requirements that you have to meet, no way of reporting misconduct in a way that doesn't also risk shooting your future career in the foot, and feeling like you're generally unsupported and alone. And you have, the perfect storm for making people want to just exit out of life in general. Junior doctors getting treated like apprentices do in shitty trades. At least as a tradesman, I can call my boss a cunt. Oh no, fuck, I probably got demonetized by saying that. My doctors have confirmed everything here. Yep. And that's the sad part. Because although a lot of this is anecdotal evidence, it's not hard to find the same anecdotal evidence, regardless of where you look or who you talk to. On the topic of getting no support, in Australia we have what's called the Australian Medical Students Association, right? And this is basically an organization that's supposed to look after or supposed to keep an eye on the mental health of medical students, or just the well-being of medical students in general. And when I say that a lot of the measures they implement to combat this problem do not seem to be oriented around student well-being, this is an example of what I mean. So this was something that they tried to do, I think how long? Yeah, 2023. So around this time last year, right? Or just about a month ago now. So basically what they would do is the government invested in mental health first aid training, right? So basically what they would do is they would introduce a course where they would teach medical students around the country about how to recognize the signs of deteriorating mental health and how they could possibly treat these signs of deterioration. Again, this is emblematic of a lot of attempts at addressing this particular problem, because it's more focused around making medical students more resilient than it is about addressing any of the systemic problems that underlie the environment in which they are being trained. So, it just... this was actually forwarded to me by a medical student who I'm friends with, who goes to a completely different university to the one that we were talking about before. And he sent this to me, and the message that he sent was, what the fuck? What the fuck are we expected to do with this? How is this supposed to help us? And yeah, so when I first read through this, right, the only way that I can describe how it made me feel was just exasperation. This isn't like a fucking lice infestation in a monkey colony where you can just get them to groom one another for a few weeks and then the problem's fine. Like, we know, right, that therapy doesn't work when you're administering it to yourself. And are you really expecting a bunch of burnt out students to be able to support each other through these particular issues? Okay, Kiernoth, to be fair, being resilient is not necessarily a bad trait. Oh yeah, and I completely agree, right? Being resilient is always a good thing. My issue with this program, though, comes from the fact that that is their only approach to addressing these problems, right? So far, there are like no concrete systems put in place to protect students from retaliation if they were to report a senior for like misconduct or like, any sort of like ill treatment. So again, you're making them more resilient, but you're not really doing anything about the environment that is requiring them to be more resilient. They're expecting you to turn into self-diagnosing, unfeeling workers. Exactly, right? And that is exactly the problem I have. Signs that you may be mentally unwell. You looked at a list of signs that you may be mentally unwell. Yeah, this is about as effective as treating a patient with depression by giving them a checklist of which symptoms they can identify in themselves, right? So, I mean, I get that they're being taught how to, like, in theory, like, treat these symptoms as well, at least on, like, a superficial level. But what the fuck are you supposed to do if you ask someone, are you okay? And they say, no, I've wanted to kill myself for like the past 3 weeks. They want slaves. Yeah, I'm resilient, but damn, I want some support. Exactly, right? And that's the next thing that I want to get into, because these students do not feel supported. If there is one line, one single phrase, one single sentence that I feel like could definitely become like an unofficial motto of medicine, and this is a phrase that I've heard without fail from every single medical student I've ever spoken to when they talk about any of the things that are a problem for them over the course of their degree. I've heard this from every single student that's approached me about this particular issue, these particular issues. One sentence that comes up without fail: it is what it is. That is genuinely how they feel. That is their only way of coping, is to just say, it is what it is. The guy who sent me that thing from the AMSA, right? He basically had like 10 seconds worth of like actually expressing some form of annoyance or frustration over it, and then immediately afterwards, as if some switch had flipped in his brain, he just said, it is what it is. Ah, well, fuck it. It is what it is. And this shit is fucking tragic, because this basically means that before they've even had the chance to take on the full weight of the responsibilities that doctors, nurses, actual medical professionals have to take on, they've already come to the conclusion that no one gives a shit about how they're doing, and no one has to give a shit about how they're doing. So if this is the mentality that doctors and nurses are walking into their jobs with, and mind you, this isn't something that they apply to their patients' well-being, right? They still care a lot about doing their job well, care a lot about doing a good job. This is just the mentality they apply to their own well-being and health. And if you're expecting our future medical professionals to be able to sustain themselves off of this, what the fuck do you expect about the sustainability of medicine? Spencer, resilience is just tolerating abuse in this case. Exactly. And again, this is the mentality that a lot of medical students need to be able to just cope with the fact that their degree is stressful as fuck, and nobody who can actually do something about that, or is actually in a position to help, needs to care about it. And it's kind of fucked up that a lot of these people are only comfortable talking about this when they're talking about it to a friend or to someone who has expressed interest in this issue, who is outside of medicine. Because, again, they are really worried that just expressing that they are struggling or pointing fingers at a thing or a person that's making them suffer is going to shoot their future career in the foot. Because when you do medicine, right, when you have to put up with long hours, grueling assessments, people higher up than you who don't seem to care about you, the only thing you've got going for you, because you don't have a lot of a life outside of medicine, from what I've heard, is your future career. The promise that once you get through all this shit, you will have a bright and successful future ahead of you where you won't have to worry about money or happiness. And that's just not the case. So, yeah. And when I heard all of this, right? When I heard all of this rhetoric around, yeah, you should be glad that you're here in the first place. Don't complain. Do you have any idea how lucky you are to be where you are now? Do you have any idea about how many people would kill to be where you are now? I thought it was familiar, and I think a lot of you will find that familiar too. Hey, you know where we've heard that rhetoric before? Fucking Hollywood. This is like the exact same kind of mentality that kept people shutting up about people like Harvey Weinstein for decades. So, medicine, at least, well, it's also quite similar to a few of the other companies that I've talked about previously. Right down to the whole selling you on the prestige and dreams part of it, and putting you in debt if you don't comply. But yeah, medicine is an industry that has yet to have a Me Too movement or anything like that. Because, very honestly, it's plagued with a whole shit ton of systemic problems that will require more than one person to address. You need at least a team spread across both students who are willing to actually talk in the open about their issues, and staff that give enough of a shit to try to do something about it. Right? And this is like staff spread across both the academic and the clinical side, because just one without the other isn't going to do shit. Because if your clinicals are sympathetic but your academics are not, you still have to deal with like 7 years of hell before you have any chance of breaking out. But if your academic side doesn't like cares while your clinic does not, your future career is, you have to risk your future career getting stumped. Spencer, it can contribute to malpractice. My wife was told she was drug seeking with her 2 slipped discs, but I was being a stoic man when... Yeah. So we can't expect doctors that are going to perform to the best of their ability or to the best of their potential when this is the fucking environment that we're like, that we're essentially raising them in. Because, and I really want to emphasize, like, I'm not a med student, right? I don't have personal experience being on a clinical placement. I have never been yelled at by a doctor for not getting something right. I've never had to put up with the stress of having to sit an exam and, feeling like it was the end of the world. This is a privilege available to me as someone who does an arts degree, because since I know that there is a 50-50 chance that I won't be employed even after I get my degree, I don't give a shit about that kind of stuff. I just perform, right? I do the best that I can, and that is okay for me. But for med students, like, again, even though I'm not personally in this, I've heard enough anecdotal evidence from enough different people. And these are people who are like different years in their med degree, different universities, all giving me information that corroborates what the others are saying. And what the picture that they paint is a fucking demonic one, especially for people who we are expecting to be the most empathetic, compassionate individuals in our society. Like, medical professionals get paid a lot, and it's for good reason, because whenever you go through hell, they are obligated to go through it with you. It boggles the mind. I hate this kind of approach from the bottom of my soul. I've chased countless it'll get better once I reach this ideas, and none of them have made me happier, if I ever reach them at all. Yeah, I mean, like, purely from a psychological standpoint, like, if you set goals for yourself, once you meet those goals, your brain has a tendency of setting your expectations even higher. But in this case, it's objectively like what you said, right? Where a goalpost is put in front of you, and it's not even a real goalpost. The person who starts it will have to be the Jesus of the medical field. That's the thing that I'm the most worried about. Because of what I talked about earlier, this issue only tends to get attention when someone actually takes their own life. Like, why is that the threshold we need to reach before more people start talking about this? And I'm not putting the onus about talking on this on the medical students, right? They've done more than enough by just surviving this environment. I'm talking about like fucking academics who are aware that their students are going through these struggles. I'm talking about senior doctors who have gone through the same struggles in the past and may or may not be observing those same struggles being like, that their students are now, their mentees are now going through, right? And again, this is just for news, for modern journalism, this is not an issue that is worth their time. And this doesn't have enough eyeballs on it. Kenneth, paramedics, EMTs get treated like cattle too. Yeah, I recently started watching Bricky. So if you don't know who Bricky is, he's a guy who does game reviews. He got really big off of doing Warhammer lore summaries, I think. And I think he used to be an EMT or like a firefighter. And he has several moments where like in between, like on his streams, or like several moments that I've seen from like clips and stuff, where he talks about how shit he was treated while being like an EMT or like a firefighter or something like that. So again, this is not a problem that's unique to like just medicine. This is not even a problem that's unique to just Australia. This is a thing in general, but I'm only talking about it in reference to Australia because one, that's the problem that I have receipts for, and two, that's the problem I've heard the most about personally. So yeah, my brother-in-law's an EMT. They have a high churn rate. It doesn't surprise me. It does not surprise me at all. And I'm really convinced that the only reason med doesn't have a higher churn rate is because of how much sunk cost fallacy is associated with that fucking degree. Where even if you spend like 2 years doing it and you pull out after your second year before you even hit like placements, the sheer amount of work you had to do in high school to get an exam, like, to do well enough in your exams to get in, will probably convince you that it's not worth dropping out, even if it really is the degree that you don't see yourself doing for the rest of your life. Which, again, the ability to pull out of a university degree and to, go into something different is integral to what little fairness there is in the way that academia is being run.